Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well and staying indoors and healthy right now, because it seems to me that we're in the middle of a plague.
President Trump declaring a national emergency just a little while ago.
Sorry, I'm sure the more technical term is a pandemic, but what this video is about is that it isn't too far off to describe the experience of living during an outbreak of COVID-19 plague-like, right? Society itself seems to have shut down, or at least the non-essential parts of society like the Gallatin Valley Mall, the commercial crown jewel of Big Sky Country and the only place to catch the latest installment of Scarlett Johansson punching people. And sure, going to the movies is a lot less important than protecting the health of your fellow citizen, but to a lot of people, including myself, hearing about how Hollywood and thus the American media apparatus as a whole was affected by the disease made the virus's impact seem that much more real. Sure, you knew that the disease factually existed before, but now somehow that fact is hitting you a little bit differently.
Look, this is serious, you know? Now's the time to really think about social distancing, washing your hands.
I'll admit I'm a bit biased because the direction of the for-profit film industry always plays a direct factor in how the non-profit theater industry operates. If no one's gonna go see a movie, then who in their right mind is gonna go see a play, right? As community spaces and playhouses and even local gatherings in the park are outlawed around the world, theater with an RE artists are asking existential questions about the role that this medium can play in the daily lives of the quarantined. On paper, it can be a little bit dreadful to think about. In spite of that, and perhaps a little bit because of that, I find a diametrically opposed force, this almost sense of optimistic energy in the air. People are adaptable, and through this action, this dread transmutates into a new lifestyle which is bordering on surrealism. Somewhere in the core of our souls, creative types like you and me know deep down that we aren't the first generation of working artists to be faced with these kinds of challenges, and we aren't the first ones who will ultimately triumph and overcome the plague. The first step is always attempting to understand the narrative that we live in and the roles that we play in it. And one of the best ways to understand our current media environment is by studying the visionaries that came before us. That's right, I tricked you into clicking on a little YouTube video about theater theory. So for the three of you that are still around, the cool kids, well, where do we start? Part 1, where to start. Before they were yet another casualty of the social distancing epidemic of 2020, the Bozeman Public Library had this amazing program where once a month you can go in on a Sunday with a big tote bag and then fill it up with a bunch of books for like $3. I went to my first and for, I guess, a wild last one last February, and it was super duper fun. There were so many different texts that I didn't even know existed, but I guess that's the point of a library, huh? In between finding things that I actually wanted to read, I tried picking a selection of books which towed the line between impressing my artsy friends when they came over to visit and not getting the weird glances from the Sunday Belgrade moms. One of these books was called The Theater and Its Double by Antonin Artaud. The reason why I picked this thing was mainly because it was the first theater text that I picked up that didn't have a cover of a possibly dead naked person on the front of it. And if anything, it looks like a new Sting album. In seriousness, this wasn't my first exposure to the works of Artaud. I knew that he was some important theater guy and that everyone was supposed to know who he was, and like Chekhov or Brecht, he was actually known more for the theories that he wrote and thus the theater that he inspired other than the theater that he actually produced in his own lifetime. You know, stuffy old dead white liberal shit. Artaud and his magnum opus Titaïd is mostly known for laying the groundwork of the theater of cruelty. And we aren't going to go so much into that, but some of his adjacent pontifications. So what does this book and its theories have to do with COVID-19? Don't worry, we'll get into that. I'm building dramatic tension. When I started rereading the text for the first time since pretending to read it in sophomore year of college, I was taken aback by how dense and poetic it is. It was a difficult read at first, but it wasn't long before I actually started really enjoying myself. Maybe it's because I'm a complete nerd, but Artaud legitimately has some cool things to say about the theater and how it actually functions in society. The book starts with a cool opener that philosophizes on the usefulness of recognizing our own natural impulses or accepting that natural things will exist whether or not we understand them, and it's best that we should just accept them and go from there. It's one of the best hooks that I've read since Das Kapital's theory of exchange value, which if you aren't familiar with that, then you can just catch it on the latest Now That's What I Call Socialism. So he finishes his prologue, and at around this point, the average reader should be thinking, well, yeah, other than some of the casual racism, he's really onto something here. Let's see what he says next about the nature of art and stuff. And then, with absolutely no segue whatsoever, he makes a hard pivot and then immediately starts talking about plagues for like half a chapter. When I first read this thing, the analogy was at worst pretentious and at best inaccessible to a 21st century American. But
millions of Americans now cut off from life as they've known it, fearing they will get sick and wondering when this nightmare will end.
Reading through Artaud's observations about plagues and comparing them to what he believed the theater was and needed to be, all while COVID-19's narrative dominates our daily lives, things are starting to make a little bit more sense. And I wanted to share some of these theories with you, with the hope that they might actually be of some use to you understanding the world the same way that this brought a little bit more clarity into my life. Or if anything, you could just use it as an excuse to never have to read Artaud. That is perfectly reasonable. Part 2. Plague as Theater. Artaud makes distinctions between what the plague literally does and how we respond to it. Perhaps his most enduring point is that throughout human history, the effect of a plague had more to do with the psychological and emotional and spiritual effects than the physical. History, sacred books, among them the Bible, certain old medical treatises, describe externally all sorts of plagues concerning which they seem to have paid much less attention to morbid symptoms than to the demoralizing and prodigious effect produced on the victims' minds. He posits that the plague that ravaged civilizations from ancient Egypt to Greece to Italy might not have been the same virus, but it was the same disease. This disease being our fear of the plague and the subsequent societal breakdown that occurs. Whatever may be the errors of historians or physicians concerning the plague, I believe that we can agree upon the idea of a malady that would be a kind of psychic entity and would not be carried by a virus. So throughout human history, the plague isn't real when people get sick. The plague is real when people believe it's real. And here is how Artaud describes that phenomenon in action. Once the plague is established in a city, the regular forms collapse. There is no maintenance of roads and sewers, no army, no police, no municipal administration. The dregs of the population, apparently immunized by their frenzied greed, enter the open houses and pillage riches that they know will serve no purpose or profit. And at that moment, the theater is born. The theater, i.e. an immediate gratuitousness provoking acts without use or profit. As I said, spoken like a true poet. But where it's easy for a lot of theater theory to get bogged down by the metaphor, his analogy is thorough, to the point that you can interpret it quite literally if you'd like. He directly compares the force motivating an actor to that force motivating a plague victim. He compares the personages we take on in the middle of the plague to characters written by playwrights, and perhaps most amusingly, He compares the delirious public of the plague to the equally delirious public that we have to perform to. What I find supremely fascinating is how he also references various political leaders throughout history, like St. Augustine of ancient Rome, who took a disliking to the theater's effect on the public. Many authoritarian politicians throughout human history view theater as a disease to be eradicated. Otherwise, we would witness the downfall of society, as the same with any other virus. Especially theater that appealed to the masses by depicting murder and magic and incest. And I'm not joking about that last part. One of the more infamous plays which Artaud references is the English play titled "'Tis Pity She's a Whore" by John Ford. It's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back in a whole genre of raunchy theater that was coming out at the time. It's about a couple of young noble siblings who are madly in love with each other and all of the subsequent problems that entail. It is honestly a beautiful play. And when it is performed successfully, then you get swept up into the magic of it all and forget that the young lovers are siblings. It doesn't condone nor condemn the incest. If anything, it's presented as an unquestioned and natural, unstoppable force. So the themes of the play were less about is incest right or wrong, and it was more about how human beings react to something that is so natural and powerful that it is out of their control. Audiences loved edgy plays like this, but the puritanical English government at the time looked at the theater industry as a whole and said, y'all need Jesus, and then shut it the hell down. Right now, theater spaces are closed because we have a scientific understanding of microbiology, but throughout a lot of history, where disease was viewed like a spiritual event, theater spaces were treated like petri dishes of sin. So there is a lot of evidence that Artaud points to which supports his theory that the ideas inspired by a plague can be dangerous, and thus the ideas themselves in isolation can be just as dangerous as what the plague brings. But much like George R.R. Martin, Artaud believed that these stories weren't popular for no reason. These are narratives that on some level society needs the same way that people need medicine, with theater being the hospitals. Part 3. Why make theater? Theater is an abstract product, and theater theory is an even more abstract concept, but you might have gathered by now that we can't deny theatricality is a concrete and very real thing with real-world impacts on our behaviors, worldviews, and thus our material existence. By decoupling our human actions from the disease itself, we can see the damage that the virus actually causes and what damage comes from the act. Understanding theater is vital in a world where our beliefs actively shape our reality and behavior, because theater is where we construct belief. An audience attending a show generally wishes to suspend their disbelief. We literally make believe. Something I want to note is that theater as a product needs to be in the moment and present to even exist. At least that's what I believe. That is what makes it so abstract. You can't point at what the theater is. It's the ethereal summation of so many things in the material world that make what it is, and this is reflected in how we speak about it. We don't make belief because there isn't like this belief that we can point to and measure and weigh. However, we do recognize when we actively believe in the events proposed given circumstances, and that is when the product actually exists. For example, when you go to see Hamlet, you know that you're seeing a fake series of events, but you want it to feel real. So anytime that you're thinking, this is Hamlet, instead of this is an actor speaking, is a moment where the theater product is actually doing its job for you. And this is why audiences like actors who are present on stage, spontaneous, in the moment, not in their head, impulsive, organic, truthful, all those good acting words that your professor gave to you that you had no idea what they were talking about until like 5 years after you graduated. The reason I think that this element is so important to the medium is because theater isn't a passive art form. Truly playing with a theatrical event takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, And it's the job of theater artists to inspire audiences to play with the event at the level that the event needs to exist. And this is why so many working artists are of the mind that the art that we make isn't a mirror with which to reflect reality, but a tool with which we use to shape it. So what is the point in all of this? Well, our language shapes reality on stage and off. A lot of the time we want to express something to our loved ones or other people that we need things from, and we simply don't have the right words or way to collect our thoughts and thus communicate them. We are social creatures. Having the right words to say is vital, literally as significant as having the resources that you need, because you don't get one without the other. The intense experiences one gets from the theater aren't that psychologically or even physiologically different from the intense experiences that you get in real life, except for the fact that in the theater, the event is ultimately within the power of the people who make it. Compared with the murderer's fury, which exhausts itself, that of the tragic actor remains enclosed within a perfect circle. The murderer's fury has accomplished an act, discharges itself, and loses contact with the force that inspired it but can no longer sustain it. That of the actor has taken a form that negates itself just to the degree it frees itself and is dissolved into universality. Well, that last sentence was a doozy. I'll try to break it down. The form is the costume, the set, the text, and the blocking, etc., but the form can't be as real as what it's actually depicting. So it's a negated reality. You see the setting of a town, and part of your brain says, that is a town, and another part of your brain says, that is not a town at the same time. You see Romeo kill Tybalt, and your brain thinks, this is a murder, but it isn't a murder. The theater is real, but it isn't really real. Even if, in the moment, the audience member completely believes in the illusion, unlike a real murder, they can leave at any time that they want or when the play is over and then know that this completely believable thing didn't factually happen. So this intentionality behind everyone choosing to make this believable idea in real time distills it into its own reality concentrate. Artaud wished to create events which deconstructed traditional norms and invent new words which called out our arbitrary invisible cultural barriers and reduced the moment's existence to a primordial soup of emotion and thought. From this, all of the players, especially the audience, spontaneously create a new shared reality that we get to own. And I think that's really cool. His ideal theatrical events often took the form of balls-to-the-wall mythical horror, which put people in similar spiritual and emotional states as they would experience during a literal plague.
Bitch! Give me my payment! Shit! What's the matter with you? Look! Oh, daughter!
And you can start to see where the phrase the theater of cruelty started to form. I haven't produced any theater of cruelty myself, at least not intentionally, so I don't have a personal reference point for the effect that as a performer it brings to the audience and or myself. However, I have helped a company produce the feeling of catharsis with varying degrees of success. Catharsis is, of course, a little bit more tame than what Artaud is going for, often delivered through safe, recognizable forms like a Shakespearean play or even a musical. But regardless of genre or style or technique, there is often a magical effect that takes place in the theater. One that might occur once a run or once a show if you're good enough. It's an effect that every artist has recognized, and you might already sense what I'm talking about. It's one which fuels our very imperative to create in the first place. Those moments when you're just in it, and you're listening and playing along, and everything is going perfectly, and you're landing every line, and you and the other performers are on the top of your game, and the audience is just truly listening. And then these forms and symbols begin to erode, and then some kind of universal truth is discovered. You know it's a costume. You know that these are like plastic daggers that you're gonna stab into the guy. That there's that fight brain going on in the back of your mind. You're like, okay, take it, make eye contact. Yep, I'm gonna stab you. Yep, you see the knife. All right, I'm good. In that moment, it isn't just Caesar being stabbed. It is every relationship that someone ever had, has, or ever will have with someone in power being stabbed. Not just an act of violence. It is every act of violence that anyone and you and everyone has ever had, has, or ever will experience. This is the thing that is unique to what theater is. Gosh, I love this medium, guys. The reason that this pumps me up so much, it just gives me such hope for humans, because we're awesome. It's that you and I might have completely different reference points when it comes to things like politics, but through the theater, we can understand the story of Caesar, and through this shared icon, we can both agree on what a corrupt politician looks like. And another cool thing about how this iconography, it doesn't exist within the form itself, but how these forms relate to each other, is that whether you stage Caesar or Lord Farquaad, you will still channel that same corrupt politician meaning. Moments like those are when the theater is at its best, and that is what theater artists live for and live to create. Artaud thought, well, if we can make moments of it, then what would it take to, from the ground up, make a theater that is nothing but that? A theater entirely composed of a battle of symbols reduced to pure, unambiguously recognizable meaning could potentially create new words and iconography which accurately describe those universal truths that we all feel but have trouble articulating with each other. This is how time after time art has the capacity to unite people in times of cultural stress or even societal crises. So this essay ended up being a bit longer than I originally intended, and as things are shaking out, it seems that COVID-19 will be on people's minds for a lot longer than we initially expected. So I thought it would be good to find a stopping point and then make this video the first part in a series. I hope this first video illustrates how the plague's relationship to our societal narratives has always fascinated theorists and artists. So if you have been asking yourself some of these questions, or even thinking of some of the same ideas or truths that I or Artaud discussed, then know that you aren't alone. So please ask any questions that you might have in the comments below, if I could have been more clear about any of my points, or if there are any points that you would like me to extrapolate on. In the next episode, we will investigate how theatricality influences the way that we either accept or reject the news based on our suspension of disbelief. In the meantime, Artaud's theories are available for free online, and I've left a couple of links in the description below for you to do some studying on your own. Or even if you wanted to make your own channel to engage with this one. There's a lot of movie content out there. Let's see if we could get some more theater theory content on YouTube, guys. Let's do this. Actually, in seriousness, if you are bilingual in French and English, I would love to hear some of your thoughts on Artaud, and whether you think that there are any nuances or whole ideas that are lost in the translation. But anyway, thank you so much for embarking on this video essay journey with me and everyone else at The Verge. My colleagues are also producing some delightful video series, which you should totally check out if you want some more wholesome stay-at-home DIY theater content. As this channel grows and our relationship between audience and creator develops together, then I'm really excited to learn more things and share them with you guys. I also wanted to mention something super duper fun. So there were a few other essay topics that I was expecting to do after this one, but given that this is a series and I don't want the next 3 months to be nothing but COVID-19 related content, I thought it would be nice to fast track some of those things and have the videos kind of interlock with each other. And I thought it'd be really cool if you guys got to pick the next one. I want to have my supply meet your demand. So here are the 3 ideas that I'm cooking up. 1. Star Wars acting, where we use Star Wars and adjacent media like Game of Thrones to break down theater theory with an emphasis on performance. 2. The theater economy, where we critically analyze businesses as theater spaces and discuss the value of acting as a service. And 3. Why Shrek the Musical is the best, where I gush over why Shrek is simply the best musical, if not piece of American theater ever produced. I am dead serious about that one. Please send us an email or comment below with your choice for the next video topic for me to work on. I'll tally up the votes exactly 1 week after posting this video, and then we'll announce an update saying what it is. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you stay safe and healthy out there. Bye-bye!